Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The U.S. hit 900,000 deaths due to COVID-19. That is what they're saying, more than the entire population of Indianapolis, San Francisco, or Charlotte, North Carolina. A city completely wiped out, 900,000 officially. And look, you know, I still say that number is even higher because you've got states like Florida. You've got states all across this country run by Republican governors who we don't want people to know what's going on. So, you know, I'm going to say it's higher. But you stop and you think about it. We have had 76 million cases of COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. And you think about the numbers, when you break it down into, you know, it's one in, you know, a little more than 80, you know, who die from this. That is remarkable. Now we're coming down the other side of the spike, about 1 million new cases every 3 days. That's heading in the right direction. Deaths should be coming down. So heading in a decent direction. Hopeful this is it, but at the end of it, we've got to get out there and vaccinate the rest of the world, and the rest of the world wants it, especially in developing countries, so that there are no more variants, there are no more surprises, there are no more stuff popping up. Evidently, we're going to surveilling wastewater across the country to follow where and when the next outbreak could happen. But let's hope that doesn't. Good news today, the Biden boom. And I like that, the Biden boom, because look, if the former guy were in the White House, he would be literally doing backflips in the Rose Garden over the numbers that came out today. In Biden's first year as president, 6.6 million jobs were created in the private sector under his tenure, just 2 million under the former guy. But if you remember, again, I like us to go back to that year. He was handed a pretty good economy, but he said it was horrible, terrible, the sky's falling. Best economy ever, he claims. He built the best economy ever. Never saw above 3% growth, though. But 6.6 million in the first year. Some revisions of the last couple of months of last year, November. They revised upwards from 249,000 to 647,000, and December upward from 199 to 510. That's an additional 709,000 more than previously reported. Good stuff there. Happy. Good. It's what we need. We need more jobs. We need more economic activity in them. And as the money from the Build Back Better, from the infrastructure plan gets out there, and if we can get some Build Back Better stuff going, you can create even more jobs. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments on this. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, some interesting news coming out of Congress today. Evidently, some Democratic staffers, or as the article that I was reading put it, and this is brilliant. This is why unions get a bad name, because everybody reporting on it is bad at it. But this Kayla Epstein, she writes, a secretive group of Democratic congressional staffers emerged from the shadows. You know, like it's some kind of lurking kind of, nefarious plot to announce their ambitious goal. No, they want to join a union. They're tired of working for poverty wages, tired of working long hours for poverty wages. They're tired of not getting the benefits that they deserve. And I'm all in favor. In fact, a lot of Democratic representatives are, and they should be. The interesting part of this, the interesting part for me, is how is this going to work? And this is what I've been asking about. You know, the DNC is organized. A lot of Democratic candidates have organized their campaign staffs. How is this going to work in the political balance game? Because you're going to have Republicans who are going to fight this tooth and nail And will this give them the advantage? They can exploit and degrade um, and use their workers as horribly as they want, while Democrats have to follow decent standards. I say that all members of Congress, all the congressional staffers, should have union protections. Should have a contract where everything is laid out, like every CEO in this country. But it's going to be interesting because, Nancy Pelosi came out and said she's supported it. You have Andy Levin, who's a good friend of the show. He tweeted out that at the request of the new union, next week we will take a legislative action to afford congressional staff the freedom to form a union, a fundamental right for all workers. I'm in favor of it. Now, some hurdles, some interesting steps potentially, in that they're going to have to, I guess, organize the way it looks. They're going to have to organize each individual office, all 538 of them, and each of them will be their own little bargaining unit, and with an overarching umbrella of the Congressional Staff Union or the Congressional Workers Union, because they can't have a blanket agreement, evidently, because each little office is a little fiefdom. And I guess this comes out of because they're able to form a union because of Section 220 of the Congressional Accountability Act. This is what they're saying. We'll see what this vote comes out with next week, but I think this is a good step. I think if legislators, and this is where some of my conservative friends like to throw around that amendment that Congress should have to abide by the rules that they put in place for everybody else. This is one of those, but it should apply to all workers. Now, for me, the interesting part, will Republican staffers join on? Because understand, they work for poverty wages too. The difference, and this is the interesting part of this, the difference is there's a lot more places for Republican staffers to go, and having the union, if they were to join a union, that would, I guarantee, would harm their ability to go and work for these anti-union groups. Because, how do you go work for the anti-union national right to work people, having been in a union and having a positive experience? How do you do that? Well, I'm sure they would figure out a way. But this is a good story. I'm happy. I think this will be a good thing for some workers. Maybe raise wages for everybody, so that, as one staffer friend from years and years ago told me, that they go to all of the functions, all of the after parties, all of the functions, just so they can eat. Not because they care about the function, but all of them. Doesn't matter their side of the aisle. They go there just so they could eat. So there is that. But I wish them well, and I hope maybe we'll get somebody to come talk to us about what's going on with the campaign. It's been almost 13 months. It's almost 13 months, and finally Mike Pence has slithered out of his hole. He decided the right time to come out. No, he's not coming out of the closet, although I'm sure a lot of people thought that was the case. This is not it. He doesn't have the sparkle in the glitter and the backsideless pants. No, not yet. Maybe. But he gave a speech today in Florida. Evidently, the Federalist Society and the wealth class are having their little powwow, and he gave this big coming out speech to a group of Federalist Society lawyers. Nobody who was going to call him on anything. So this was probably this was his safe space. This was his safe space. So in his safe space, he came out and said what all of us know. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. We knew that. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Glad you know. He said, frankly, there is almost no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. That was what they were setting him up to do, and I'm glad he feels this way. Because, well, we were that close. He says, the truth is there's more at stake than our party or political future. And I absolutely agree. Democracy itself is at stake, our system of government, our institutions, our rule of law, which is why I have people all the time going, why do you always focus on the former guy? Why, you should get over that guy. No, we can't get over what happened on January 6th until the people who did it are held accountable. I will not rest. I will not sleep. I will not stop talking about what happened on January 6th and all of those criminals until they are safely behind bars, until we lock them up and throw the key away. Now, Pence, in his safe space, did go through all of this. He went through all of the whole, we did our duty, but, it belongs to the American people, blah, 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 blah. He did also say, if we lose faith in the Constitution, we won't just lose elections, we'll lose our country. And this is him building. This is his campaign ad, because he's gonna run for president in 24, right? This is him trying to remake his brand, trying to find if there are some on the other side, because his bridge is burned with Trump. He didn't do what he was supposed to do on January 6th. He is done. So he's got to find his own path. He's got to find his own way. And this I see this as that attempt. He's laid it out. Hey, it's the American people's presidency. The fact that anyone thinks any one person could do this, un-American. Faith in the Constitution, making his spiel. And then, did the about face and went after Democrats for rising inflation and for, what's going on in a lot of cities across the country and what happened in Afghanistan. Now, a lot of that stuff is due to the fact that the former guy was so bad. Biden didn't get handed the economy that Trump got handed. A growing economy with low unemployment, with good growth, with steady growth. Nope, didn't get that. Biden didn't get that at all. In fact, he got an economy that was in the middle of a pandemic, millions and millions of people unemployed, and they had to do something. And COVID raging. And, let's not forget January 6th. Let's not forget the fact that they didn't have any transition period whatsoever. There was no working with the former administration. There was none of that. There was walking in on day one and going, go. And this is what people forget. Look, I give the Biden administration a little bit of slack. There are things they've done that I'm not thrilled with, but I give them a little bit of slack in the areas of hey, they didn't get a transition period. There was no seamless transition. And now you've got Pence out here getting ready to do his thing in an interesting moment, because today's the day the Republican Party, and I don't know where Pence is going to go, to be honest with you. I don't know where his home is. But this is the day that the RNC, the Republican National Committee, this is the day that they decide they're going to censure Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. Because this is the day that they've decided to officially declare. They've now staked the flag in the ground. This is the official declaration that what happened on January 6th, they consider to be legitimate political discourse. Can anyone look at the videos of what happened? And good on Liz Cheney. She tweeted out with an image of what happened that day and basically asked the question, is this legitimate political discourse? Is that what this is? Now understand. Ronna McDaniel, who is the head of the RNC, who was a big part of what happened here, is Mitt Romney's niece. Isn't it interesting how cozy all this stuff is? How, that's it's not even a 6 degrees of separation kind of thing. Just this incestuous monetary pool of, even Mitt Romney wasn't thrilled. He tweeted out today, shame falls on a party that would censure persons of conscience. We seek truth in the face of vitriol. Honor attaches to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for seeking truth, even when doing so comes at so great a personal cost. And I'll tell you, look, I am not a Cheney fan. After living through the Bush years, that name I thought would be burned forever. But in this moment, she's right. She's on the right side of history. Kinzinger, the same thing. On the right side of history. And, unfortunately, history will remember what happens. That's the reality of where we are. And the thing is the censure vote passed by overwhelming majority, a voice vote. I don't believe there was any dissent. It was passed without debate. It was passed without discussion. There was nothing there. The whole thing was like a minute tops. And you think about that 1 minute. That 1 minute will go down in history because this is the moment that the Republican Party, officially staked the flag in the ground. They have officially drew the line in the sand and said, yes, we are Trump's party. We are the party of sedition. We are the party of what happened on January 6th. We're the party that doesn't believe in the rule of law, evidently. And sadly, I look at this and, the grand old party is now a cult. And I know I'm going to get a bunch of email, and please, you can, I hope the names you use are a little bit more colorful because some of the boring ones are getting worn out. Come up with some new ones. Try and at least entertain me with your whining and complaining, because your guy, I'm hoping very soon, will be going to jail. Because all of the stuff that's coming out is confirming what we knew all along. All the stuff we were talking about, all the criming he was doing during his term, we are now finding is actually absolutely factful. And some of it's done by Trump-appointed judges. That's the fun part in this. That even it's too far for them to even go. So we got a lot to get to. I got to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Max Burns is going to be here to share some thoughts on what's going on. Also, take your calls, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day victorious West Coast maritime workers ended their 99-day strike. 40,000 members of the Maritime Federation of the Pacific reasserted control of hiring halls and won greater union recognition and wage increases. The Federation was a short-lived coalition to unite longshoremen and seamen that anticipated the rise of the ILWU. Since the 1934 strike, ship owners aimed to break the authority of the union's leader, Harry Bridges. They engaged in relentless red baiting and deportation drives against Bridges. In the weeks leading up to the strike, ship owners looked to smash the solidarity among seamen and longshoremen through a planned lockout the previous September. They stockpiled their warehouses, built up additional funds, and promoted anti-union hysteria up and down the coast. They entered into talks with the Federation during the summer of 1936, hoping to renegotiate terms originally set by arbitration awards soon to expire. Three main West Coast shipping companies, Matson, Dollar, and American Hawaiian, wanted to reverse earlier agreements regarding the control of the hiring halls. The unions stood strong against this attack on what was a cornerstone of union power. They voted overwhelmingly to strike and walked out on October 30th. As in 1934, the union fought to defend its rights to control the hiring hall. This kind of control was the only mechanism that could prevent favoritism, discrimination, corruption, and payoffs in hiring. In Irving Bernstein's Turbulent Years, he notes that in addition to the retention of control of the hiring halls, the Federation gained coast-wide uniformity in working conditions, in load limits, and standardized rates. The Federation may have been short-lived, but the roots of lasting ILWU power were firmly established.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's a name I haven't thought of in a while. Michael Avenatti. Remember him? Remember when he was everywhere for a little bit? Then went to jail. Got arrested, evidently accused of stealing from Stormy Daniels. Well, he's now been found guilty of stealing from Stormy. And, I was thinking today, I go, that poor woman, having to have to deal with Trump and then this other sleazebag stealing from her. I don't know which is worse, having to sleep with Trump or getting ripped off. And I go, but at least she got the $140,000 and it didn't bounce. At least you got that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the craziness. He could face up to 22 years in prison. Wouldn't that be fun? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on all of this. I've asked our good friend Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a columnist over at the Daily Beast, also a Democratic strategist. We'll get some of his work out on social media. Max, how are you?
Thanks for having me, Rick. How are you?
I am good. So what do you think of this? I'm looking at this Stormy story and I'm going, this poor woman, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I guess I'm going to have to put my Michael Avenatti 2020 shirts back in the pile with the Rick Santorum 2016 shirt. It's going to be a while before he's in a position to be on Twitter and running for president again. But, I take the point. There are a lot of progressives saying we shouldn't gloat about long prison sentences like this, that it's not a sign of a healthy system. But I don't think it's gloating. I think it's the fact that Michael Avenatti was an attorney who had clients who trusted him. And when you're in that position of trust as a counsel to a client, there's a heightened standard of ethics. And he knowingly and repeatedly breached those ethics. And he won't spend 22 years in jail, but he will likely see several years at least.
As well he should. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're cheating your clients, if you're pulling this stuff, you absolutely, without question, should be held accountable. And good. I'm glad he is. I want to move on because we talked about this not too long ago. But this China bill has moved through the House, basically a party line vote, 222 to 210. You had one Republican move to actually Kinzinger voted for it, and one Democrat, Stephanie Murphy, voted against it. But it's going to move forward. And to me, this America Competes Act is really, really important.
Yeah, this is huge. And it shows you how much more polarized things have become since last year when the Senate passed largely the same package with a bipartisan majority. Now it's party line vote, and it's only going to get more partisan from here. But the real challenge is now this goes into conference with the Senate. So the House and the Senate will have to hash out their differences and come up with a bill that can pass. And there's a lot of great stuff in this bill. There's a lot of very powerful anti-corruption policies in here that will really help the United States not just protect itself, but start rolling back this rising China and Russia authoritarianism. And that's hopefully something that both sides can agree is important.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we've got to pass some laws that are going to protect manufacturing in this country. And what this America Competes bill does is it's going to invest a boatload of money into revitalizing manufacturing and revitalizing and creating jobs that we need.
Yeah, and modernizing infrastructure. I think one of the big reasons we see that heavy industry and polluting industry doesn't change its ways isn't that they don't care or they don't believe in climate change. It's that the upfront cost of modernizing facilities is incredibly expensive. And this puts forward $500 million for green energy modernization. It puts forward an entire program for starting a semiconductor and microchip industry that is the latest in climate compliance. So we're not just competitive, we're actually strengthening our climate protection as well. And this is something that lets both sides walk away talking like they won. And there are very few of those kind of bills going around nowadays.
Yeah, but again, it's something we desperately need, given the fact that we've lost 70,000 factories over the last 22 years. Millions of jobs, and with that, communities that all across this country are broken. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Max Burns. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. You can check out his work over at thedailybeast.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Gary on line one. Gary, what's on your mind?
Yeah, it was about the job number there. You
Go.
have any job number?
Go.
How do they calculate? I mean, I see these people leaving, the workforce. I'm like, is there an application for that?
I would assume that they are based on employer payrolls. So there you go. How do they get the job numbers for Gary? I assume simply by payrolls. What's coming in?
Yeah, and it's also a fairly complex and often controversial set of measurements. And one of the reasons is that it's not great at actually accurately predicting the number of jobs. We saw an adjustment up 700,000 for the last quarter. And it's non-farm payrolls in most cases. And it's also self-reporting that is being done by sub-studies within the Treasury and the Department of Commerce. So it's an imperfect measure, but it does seem to be trending sharply up over the last few months of the Biden administration.
Does that answer your question there, Gary?
My question is, I heard an interesting story. I work for a company of trucking that they can't find anybody, and there's all kind of jobs, and there's all kind of people looking. But the interesting thing was about people that had to work at home now, and they're imperfectly calculated because now you're working at home on a computer, right? So you can switch jobs. So they're still working. So when people are working at home, they used to be in an office, and now they're on their computer and they're still working. But when they switch jobs and they can do it right away in minutes, are these calculated into that number?
That I don't know. All I know is that it's based on payrolls. The number of new hires that they're bringing in, what the employers are reporting. That's what it's always been, Gary. That's the best I can come up with for you, buddy. Appreciate the call, though. Thanks, man. You want to add anything to that, Max?
No, I wish I could be more help. Sadly, I passed on the economics degree. I kept falling asleep in class, but it is it's publicly published. You can look on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, provides their methodology for how they calculate this. And if anything, we've seen that it tends to undercount a bit because it's just a more traditional method that doesn't take into account, gig economy and jobs that are not traditional labor sectors that are being monitored as closely.
Now, his point is that people are working at home. They're still on payrolls. So, this is something that they count. And look, I'm somebody who doesn't, Biden gets credit for these 6.6 million new jobs created. I'm generally not someone who gives, the president did all this. And I said the same thing during Trump's era and the same thing during Obama's. The hope is that you're putting policies in place that encourage this growth. And I argue that Biden has done just that. Pretty simple stuff. But thanks, Gary. Appreciate the call. Let's move along. I want to get your thoughts on the fact that it's now come out that Jim Jordan had a 10-minute phone call with the former guy. That I think we now need to know what was said on January 6th. This is another one of those moments where the RNC coming out and saying what happened on January 6th was legitimate political discourse. I think as a country we have to have this discussion.
Yeah, it's beyond time. I think the fact that these are the people who have made a political identity of saying if you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to hide. And now they're suddenly very quiet about this. And with Jim Jordan especially, I'm curious because we've seen such a dual track of reality around January 6th that the same people publicly saying this was tourists, this was fine, nothing was going wrong, were privately calling the White House in panic, begging someone to make Donald Trump call these people off. I think Sean Hannity even directly said, only you can call your people off, and not getting a response. So it would be very interesting to me to know what Jim Jordan was talking about for 10 minutes and why he suddenly is so unable to remember what must have been a very memorable moment of his day.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this and I'm just going, we have to get to the bottom of this, and it has to be. We need to speed this stuff up because every day we're coming out with more stuff that we knew. We knew Jordan had a conversation. Now it's a 10-minute conversation. We're getting drips and drabs. We need more. This needs to happen faster.
And it certainly looks like the commission is gearing up to do something very public and very prime time because they know their time is really limited. And this just brings to the broader point of what the RNC said today about this being a legitimate form of political discourse. You expect when you accuse someone of being a fascist, they would say, "You're crazy, I'm not a fascist." Instead, the RNC is saying, actually, is fascism that bad though? It seemed to work pretty well for us here.
Well, you look
I think the only complaint they have is that it failed.
Exactly. But you look at what happened in Florida. You had the Nazi rally, and you had a governor who failed and refused, out and out refused to condemn the Nazi rally. That's how far to the extreme we've gotten. So when people go, well, why are you so bad? You're so down on the Republican Party. Because they're not the Republican Party of 20 years ago. This is a far-right extremist party. This is a cult. I mean, if you're in this moment still identifying as a Republican, something wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, we're tempted to criticize them and call them hypocrites, but in the Republican mindset today, this is not hypocrisy. Nope. There is no hypocrisy for calling for peaceful protesters who protested outside Mitch McConnell's house to be arrested and sent to prison without a trial. And in Florida, urging a law that would make it essentially legal to run over peaceful protesters who are blocking a street, and then also supporting a violent riot on the Capitol. What the Republicans have done, they view as for liberty, for protecting an America that they recognize. And any tactics against the enemy are also acceptable. So there is no reasoning here. This is us and them taken to a deadly extreme.
So let's move on to the censure. The RNC today decided that it was time to go and censure Anna Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. Did it by voice vote. There wasn't any real dissent to speak of. Like you said, legitimate political discourse. Is this the moment where you go, this is who they are, and hopefully people pay attention? Or as you said, this does not matter. Does it matter?
Yeah, I'm amazed how late the media was getting to this, where they're saying this is the latest shot in the GOP civil war. Where have you been, guys? This war is over. This party has been conquered by Donald Trump and the far right. I mean, you will not hear a drop of dissent on this from the House because the majority of Republicans agree with this deeply. We saw Mitt Romney today on Twitter weekly sort of criticize this and say that Kinzinger and Cheney have courage and we're standing by their values. But when asked what he will actually do, what tangible steps he would take to stand up for that belief, nothing. The answer is nothing, because there is nothing he can do. His view is so far in the minority right now that even if he wanted to make a show of this, there's no audience anymore. You're too late.
Yeah, and the story is Rudy Unmasked. What kind of ridiculous nonsense is Rudy Unmasked?
This is because we are living in a horror movie. I'm increasingly convinced it is Groundhog Day without Bill Murray, and every day is a worst nightmare. They had Sarah Palin on this show. They had Rudy Giuliani on this show. A few years back, they had Tucker Carlson and Tom DeLay on Dancing with the Stars. These programs have become reputation rehabilitation machines for monstrous, awful people who attempted to destroy our electoral process. The fact that Rudy Giuliani was allowed to do any of this is baffling to me.
I mean, it's incredible. And, you've got, if you can rehab his horrible train wreck of a career over these last couple of years, I guess anyone's possibly to be rehabbed. Maybe even Michael Avenatti. And if you listen to Trump's interview the other day, he said he wants everyone to come back. He's going to hire all the people back who were fired by Biden. He's going to do all this crazy stuff, playing to that base of the cult, playing to that base. And I found it interesting that Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman is suing now because he was retaliated against. Does he ever get justice in this?
I certainly hope so. I mean, he has a very strong case. The only reason Vindman was not immediately brought into some kind of case like this was because the Trump administration was running the government. And it was such an open air, corrupt, Bill Barr DOJ network that there was no hope for any justice under that presidency. Now there is hope for this. And I think there is a chance for a fair hearing. Donald Trump wasn't playing around. He said, we're going to hire back the bad people. We're going to pardon all the people from January 6th who were convicted and pled guilty. And we're going to fix the elections and fix the problems with the elections. And we should all be crystal clear what that means, and terrified.
And terrified. That's the part of it. And terrified, because sadly, you look at some of the numbers, he's got a shot. I mean, the Republican Party's eating themselves, and we're seeing this starting to happen. But at this moment, he's still got a strong base.
Yeah, he is the front runner, and I firmly believe if Donald Trump is alive in 2024, he will be the next president of the United States. I mean, people float Ron DeSantis as a challenger, but Ron DeSantis is tied at 12% with the vice president the party recently tried to murder. So I'm not sure how popular that makes him seem. And Trump is running laps around this field. Yeah. I mean, this is his party, and it's his nomination if he wants it.
Yeah. Well, what do you say about Pence's safe space speech today in front of the Federalist Society?
What I can't understand here is the urge from Democrats to try and find some bipartisanship or common ground and praise this as courage, to sort of weakly say, well, technically I couldn't break the law. A year after the fact, in a private setting that has to leak out because you can't go and say it in front of actual Republicans, it's certainly not a lesson in moral courage, is it? It's the weakest possible attempt he could have made, short of saying nothing.
Yeah, there was no profile in courage here. But real quick, Nancy sent me an email from Chicago, listening on WCPT AM 820. She said, Rick, it's a national survey of businesses and government agencies. They use the unemployment rate, referred to as U3, to find the job numbers. She said it's all very scientific. They use it all across the board, president after president. The numbers are what they are. Appreciate that. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I clarified it. Max, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you, my friend. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Anytime. Thanks.
Our good friend Max Burns. Make sure you check out the work that he does over at the Daily Beast. We'll take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1825. That was the day the Ohio legislature authorized the Canal Act. The act called for the construction of 2 canals. The first would connect Lake Erie to the Ohio River, stretching from Cleveland in the north to Portsmouth in the south. The second would connect Cincinnati to Toledo. A workforce of up to 5,000 men worked on the canal at the peak of construction. Many of the workers were German and Irish immigrants. Some had canal building experience from their work on the Erie Canal in New York, which had just been completed. These workers faced malaria and back-breaking labor. A saying of the day went, "For every mile of the canal, an Irishman is buried." But the true toll was even greater. It's estimated that as many as 6 workers died for every mile of canal crossed. The names of most of the men who built the canal are lost to history. At the start of the project, the men were paid just 30 cents a day and a ration of whiskey. The stretch between Cleveland and the Ohio River was completed in 7 years. The freight traffic on the canal spurred the growth of the small settlement on the shores of Lake Erie. Cleveland grew to become an industrial center and the 6th largest city in the United States by the early 20th century. The canal had also transformed the state of Ohio. The two main lines were connected to multiple smaller feeder canals and side cuts. Branches of the canals touched 44 of the 88 counties in Ohio. Local farmers and merchants were finally connected to the markets in the East through this elaborate network. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this censure thing's kind of a big deal in that if you look at what the RNC is saying, they're basically cutting Cheney and Kinzinger out. Now, Kinzinger doesn't care. He's leaving. He's not running for re-election. But this is basically saying there will be no support for them. They're basically cutting them off and saying, that's not what we want in our party. We're fully the party of the people who, defecated on the floor and urinated on desks and stabbed policemen with flags and carried that damn Confederate flag through our Capitol. That's who they're saying they are. This is that move. Now, will this cause the party to have some infighting? Are we expecting something to happen? Well, we'll see. I'm hoping there's a soul left in the Republican Party, because we do need to have two functional, viable, America-loving country parties in this country. Sadly, we don't have that one. I'm here to share some thoughts on, could this be the beginning of the breakup? I've asked Jack Cocchiarella to come talk with us. He is the digital head guy over at Retire Marco and Retire Ron. He also does the Zoomed In podcast. Jack, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Always a pleasure.
So, I'm looking at this as a moment where, is this an open, in public kind of pie fight in the Republican Party? Or was it the fact that they've just cut off these two and they're going to move on completely in their direction of insanity and far-right nonsense?
Well, so this is how I see it. I see that there are two sides to the Republican Party right now. One is very quiet, as it is slowly moving away from Donald Trump, doesn't want to make too big of a scene, doesn't want to be called out in his crazy emails and posts that he makes. And then the other side of the Republican Party that you saw with the RNC today is screaming as loudly as possible that we are pro-Trump, we are Trump till we die, and they are running in the direction of the right. And as this happens, it is slowly pulling the Republican Party apart until it's just going to snap. And that snap is coming soon. If Lindsey Graham is called a rhino for saying that he doesn't want the January 6th insurrectionists to be pardoned, then how can there be a functioning Republican Party without a complete commitment to what Donald Trump says every single day? And that's just not going to happen. That's why you see Donald Trump attacking Mike Pence tonight. That's why you see Donald Trump calling Ron DeSantis gutless and, throwing a little shade his way, because he knows he is losing influence. He knows that he is losing his people, and that's why this party is slowly starting to implode right before our eyes.
And that can't happen quick enough. But I'm looking at this from also a different angle as well, in that this is who the Republican Party has been for a long time. It's just now they feel emboldened to say the things that they used to whisper to each other in cloakrooms out loud. So I don't know that I don't know that there are as many of the sane, rational, quiet types that you're saying are out there. And I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping there are some. But I just don't see enough of them at this moment, especially as elections keep going on, and especially after this election cycle, where now more far-right extreme Trump candidates are going to be on the ballot than ever.
Well, what I'd say to that is Mike Pence did not wake up this morning and say, do you know what I need to do? I need to stand up for democracy. This was not a moral decision by Mike Pence. This was a political calculation that he made. He is seeing that Donald Trump's influence is going away. It's what Ron DeSantis is doing as well. That's why he's moving himself in a different direction. Ron DeSantis is so keen on not talking about his vaccination status, not even saying the word vaccine at a COVID press conference, because he knows right now that this can be a wedge issue between himself and Trump.
No, you're right.
At every event that Trump goes to, he is talking about the success that he had with the vaccine and his administration producing it. And he gets booed every single time. DeSantis wants to capitalize on that and make this his quiet little split from Trump. And that's why Trump has been attacking him on this issue. So I see it as a political calculation. That's why Lindsey Graham said that he can't really get on board with the idea of pardoning January 6th insurrectionists. This is a political calculation. It has nothing to do with what Lindsey Graham actually believes, because Lindsey Graham doesn't believe anything.
There it is.
Neither does Ron DeSantis. They don't. They're political opportunists. And the same way that the Republican Party has completely changed since 2012, they can completely change again in 2022. Mitt Romney said that Russia in 2012 was the greatest geopolitical threat to America. And what did Josh Hawley just say the other day? He says, "Hey, I think we should all be best friends." That's what Tucker Carlson's saying. That's what Ron DeSantis. That's what Trump is saying. That's what we're seeing from all of these Republicans. They are political opportunists, and when they realize that Trump is a loser, they will run away from him. He lost in the House in 2018. He lost in the presidency in 2020. He lost in the Senate in 2020. So when they say, "Hey, this guy's not going to really get us far like he has before," he's done. And why I see that as an opportunity for the party to implode is because Trump will not walk away quietly. He will go out kicking and screaming and bring the party down with him.
Yeah, and a perfect example of what's going on and how bad these elections are going to be this cycle. I look here where I'm at in Pennsylvania. We've got a Republican Party that's just, 10 stages off the cuckoo's nest. But especially the two, you got the hedgehog millionaire, David McCormick, and the snake oil salesman, Dr. Mehmet Oz, who they're attacking each other, spending millions of dollars. I think I saw a number of like $13 million in TV ads already spent by these two. Basically just ripping into each other. Oz is calling him the guy from China. McCormick, the hedgehog millionaires, saying he's that dual citizen because he was born in Turkey. I mean, it's just all the ugliness, all aimed at each other. And I got to tell you, I sit back and go, we need this. They need this.
We need a little bit. We need a little bit more of this, because they've had their Democrats in disarray saying, "Look what Kirsten Sinema did, and look what Joe Manchin did." That's what Republicans have been able to enjoy and keep talking about for the last year. But let me pose this hypothetical. Let's say, in the chance that we are working hard to make sure it doesn't happen, but if Republicans take control of the House of Representatives and they are in the majority, on day one, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene are going to, they're going to want Trump to be speaker. They've already said that.
Yep.
And two, they're going to try to impeach Biden, and they're going to try to kick Democrats off their committee assignments. And Republicans aren't going to get on board with that. At least not all of them. I don't think a majority will. And if it is a majority, the 40 of them left will be attacked by the party. They will. And it's just going to be a food fight. They're not going to be able to govern because they can't. They're an obstructionist party, and that is all the Republican Party is right now. Yeah. So I'm not saying that there will not be a portion of the American electorate that is conservative after this. There will always be, a right party that actually has, conservative ideas of how government should function. But this current iteration of the GOP that is just, we have to do whatever we can to hold power, that is going to fall apart, because they will tear themselves apart. Well,
the hope is that you're right in this. The doomsday scenario is that you're not correct, and we end up with President Trump again, because they do impeach Biden and Harris for no reason whatsoever, because they have the masses willing to carry a Confederate flag through our Capitol, Jack.
Well, I think that Democrats, when they were least popular, was when they were trying to impeach Donald Trump for the first time. And like I said, Republicans are going to be making these political calculations, because that's all they care about is the politics of this. They don't have a belief system, so they'll know that these attacks of trying to get Democrats off of their committees and try to impeach Joe Biden, which quite literally could never happen. They'd never have the votes in the Senate, and I don't even think they'd have the votes in the House. They'll understand that they will become politically unpopular, that these issues are toxic, that they will just embarrass themselves to the rest of the American electorate. And if they try to, and if they do so, 2024 is going to be a wake-up call for them, because Americans will be so tired of hearing this nonsense from Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. If they're actually in positions of authority, they'll be so tired of it. They'll say, we can never do this again. That was awful. We are so tired of what these people have to say and getting absolutely nothing done. But I think we're just going to move on from the GOP. And that is my hope. That is
Jack,
my hope.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Jack Cocchiarella. Jack's the host of the Zoomed In podcast. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. I wish I could share your optimism in this. I really do, because we lived through 4 years of Trump. We lived through a pandemic. We lived through all kinds of craziness, and he still got 74 million votes. He still got so many more than I thought was going to happen. And it was so much closer than it should have been. And I got to tell you, I wish I shared your optimism.
Well, I think I'm just banking on the Republican Party destroying itself, because that's just what I see. That is just what I see.
Well, good, because look, a couple of years of watching those clowns, do their thing. Now, you brought up the fact that they're going to try and throw Democrats off of committees. Yeah, this was part of the reason I didn't want them to be throwing Marjorie Taylor Greene off of the Education Committee. And I think we've talked about this before. I thought she should have been right there, if for no other reason than to listen to her open her mouth and have anyone else on the committee going, this is why we need more money for education, Exhibit A.
Yes.
I was not in favor of it. I took a lot of heat for it, but I'm not in favor. She should have stayed there, and we should have hung that albatross around the Republicans' neck and let them deal with it instead of trying to clean things up. And now they're going to have the excuse to do it to Democrats if they have the chance.
And absolutely. And, there's definitely a conversation to be had of, should we have let Marjorie Taylor Greene continue to spread her lies and just really show that this is the face of the Republican Party? And it was a repugnant face of the Republican Party and the lies that she was spreading. But I think that's why I have this belief, because if Republicans are in control of the House of Representatives, that is all that we are going to see. Donald Trump being off Twitter was the best thing that ever could have happened to him, because people forgot how terrible and crazy he was. And the same goes for Marjorie Taylor Greene. So if we have to have those people running our government, being the leaders in the House of Representatives, then we're really going to see how terrible this party has become. And that's why I believe they'll be tearing themselves apart.
Yeah, I'm glad that Trump is off of Twitter. I struggle with the whole censor thing, but I'm glad he's off. But he's going to come up with his own thing, Jack. Truth Social's coming.
Yeah, Devin Nunes put in charge of it. That guy's always gotten great stuff done. I can't name anything for you, but I bet that's what he'd say.
Well, he's got a cow, right?
He's got a great farm. There's nothing wrong with that. Having a couple cows for Devin Nunes. He's got a couple cows, no success in Congress, but he'll take what he can get.
I'm waiting for the story in the headline. Devin Nunes gets cheated out of pay. I'm waiting for Trump to stiff him and him to come crying back or file a lawsuit. I'm waiting for that. But the last line of questioning I got for you, because obviously the censure today it was not really as big a news as I thought it should have been. The fact that the Republican Party now in a voice vote, I don't know if there was much of a voice vote in opposition, but now this censure happened. They're drawing the line in the sand, saying what happened on January 6th was legitimate political discourse. Those are chosen words. I want your thoughts on it.
Well, it was a discourse that went it sounded like that. It was sheep. That's what I heard. That was the discourse. That was the conversation going back and forth. Yeah, those were chosen words. That was not, we have a question for you as you're walking out of a room and kind of throwing something out there. No, those were chosen words. That was the specific statement that they wanted to make. They are going full commitment. That's what I said. We have this portion of the Republican Party that is being as loud as they can, talking about we are going as far as we can to the right. We are going as far as we can with Trump, and they are screaming about it. But what we're not seeing are these small little decisions being made by Ron DeSantis, by Lindsey Graham, by, we're seeing it with Mike Pence today, where they're quietly moving away. And what we're having is this, just the pulling is going to snap. Because that's what's happening. When you have such crazy extremes that the Republican Party is going to, at some point it will not be able to contain itself and it'll snap.
Just let me get this picture in my head. Our only hope for a savior of liberal democracy, of our constitutionally limited democratic system, is Lindsey Graham. who was against Trump, then kissed Trump's butt, then was with John McCain, was against John McCain.
So it's crazy. It's crazy that that's what it sounds like. I'm not saying that I think what our saving grace is going to be is Josh Hawley and Ron DeSantis and Lindsey Graham. What I think is those people are political opportunists. They care about the opportunity for them to get more power. And so when they abandon Trump, Trump will not just step away. He will fight them back. And so it'll be the battle that we did not get in the 2016 Republican primary when Ted Cruz just kind of stepped away. Lindsey Graham just stepped away. They said, okay, I don't have the courage. I don't have the backbone. I'm a bowl of jello, right? I'm just going to let it happen. But now I think they are going to say, this is not a winning strategy. We can't keep with Trump. And both ways, if they go with Trump, I think they'll lose because Trump's a loser. And if they go away from Trump, I think they won't have enough Republican support to win because Trump will run as an independent. He doesn't care. He'll do whatever he needs to keep power, to try to get power back.
So is that the perfect?
He'll run in the Trump party.
Is that the perfect scenario then? 2024, you got Trump running as an independent?
That is the perfect scenario because I remember in 2021, we thought, well, Trump might form his own party. And why did we think that? We thought Trump might form his own party because it looked like Mitch McConnell was saying, we're done with Trump. It looked like Kevin McCarthy was saying, we're done with Trump. Remember those speeches that they made? Obviously, they didn't believe a word they said. But those speeches that they made on January 6th, 7th, 8th, and just for a couple of days there, it looked like they were moving on from Trump. And that's when we said, maybe he'll form his own party. This will be great. They'll all collapse in on each other. And it didn't happen because they just fell right back in line. But this time, that's not going to happen because I think they're starting to realize Trump is not a winning strategy. Trump-backed candidates are lagging in their fundraising. Trump-backed candidates are kind of lagging in the polls. Trump-backed candidates don't have the same appeal that they used to. The Trump rallies don't have the same appeal that they used to. The Trump, coloring book tour that he's doing right now, there are empty seats. He does not have the same appeal that he used to. It's not a winning strategy. It's not a winning strategy either way they go. I see it going down.
From your lips, Jack, from your lips. Good stuff. Hope folks will take a look at the Zoomed In podcast. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. But, Jack, I appreciate the time, man. Great stuff as always. Keep up the great work. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Good stuff, Jack Cocchiarella. No, you see, this is one of those things where you come back to this place where the GOP has no core values, no ideology, no policy to speak of. So it's got to be fear, smear, anger, which is why, interestingly enough, when they polled, Republican voters, only 19% of them were okay with Biden appointing a black woman. They don't even know who it's going to be yet, but they know they don't want a black woman. That's the GOP. We'll take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869, and we celebrate the birthday of one of the most formidable figures in U.S. labor history. Big Bill Haywood was one of the founders of the Industrial Workers of the World, or IWW, in 1905. He was also active in the Socialist Party. Big Bill entered the mines at only 9 years of age. He became the Secretary of Treasury of the Western Federation of Miners in 1900. During his tenure, the Colorado mining wars occurred in the state's Cripple Creek area. The prolonged, bloody struggle between miners and mine owners saw the deaths of more than 30 workers. In the end, the striking miners were defeated and their demands largely left unmet. That experience convinced Haywood that the only way for labor to succeed was to organize across job title and trade, and to include industrial workers. This one big union philosophy motivated him to found the IWW. Haywood became known for advocating for an 8-hour workday. In his booming voice, Big Bill would declare, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for play, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours a day. In 1918, Haywood fell victim to the first Red Scare. He was convicted of violating the Espionage Act of 1917 for calling for a strike while the nation was fighting World War I. His sentence was 20 years in prison. Haywood served 1 year. Then, while out on appeal, he jumped bail and fled to the Soviet Union, where he died 10 years later. He is often remembered for a famous quote from his autobiography, which reads, "The mine owners did not find the gold, they did not mine the gold, they did not mill the gold. But by some weird alchemy, all the gold belongs to them."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind? Missouri, great state of Missouri. Evidently a Republican state senator, a guy named Eric Burleson. Evidently Eric has a piece of legislation that would basically tie prosecutors' hands and tie police's hands in the event that someone shoots someone. Evidently, this bill seeks to give shooters and other assailants the benefit of the doubt. We're just going to give the benefit of the doubt that they were, in fact, acting in self-defense. If they say, hey, I was acting in self-defense, then you cannot bring charges against them. Police would have to go and find reasonable cause to believe that they were not acting in self-defense. And what it does is it puts now much more of a legal framework in place for people to go, you can't shoot me. You can't arrest me. I was acting in self-defense. I was fearing for my life. And you could go, well, with every shooting, couldn't you argue that on some level? Now, there are some people who are saying, oh, this is going to give people the license to go out and murder people because all you got to do is, hey, I was afraid. This is where I have a problem with where Republicans are taking some of our laws. Well, actually, most of them. They have this fantasy, this fetish idea. They've really fetishized the Wild West, and they think Wyatt. Everyone was Wyatt Earp. There were duels on every street corner, and it wasn't quite like that. But they have this fantasy, and they want to create this legislative framework where everyone's going to be carrying a gun and everyone's going to be throwing shots at each other. I don't want to take the power away from prosecutors to be able to move forward on a case because there's a legal piece of a framework that says no, you sorry, they get the benefit of the doubt. The dead person doesn't get a voice because after all, they're dead. I fear we've gotten into this crazy gun place because of laws like the stand your ground stuff, like in Florida, that kind of stuff, where a guy starts a fight with somebody, gets his butt kicked, as he should have, and then goes, oh, well, I was in fear of my life. I had to protect myself because I started this fight, and now I'm losing, and now I have to kill this person. And I've asked that question numerous times over the years. Is this the right direction to go? Is it the right direction to where, hey, this guy yelled at me. I was in fear of my life. I didn't know what he was going to do. And I told the story not too long ago where, my son and I were driving and this guy was just losing his ever-loving flipping mind. And he jumps out of the car and he runs up to the window and he's screaming everything. We didn't actually understand what he said. And I just reached out the window and just pushed him as hard as I could to get him away from the car. And he kind of just, woke up, and I'm going, at this moment, could he have shot me? Could I have shot him? Because now both of us could say, well, we were both in fear for our lives. And no one would be held accountable. Now, here's my problem. If two idiots get into it and they end up shooting each other and we end up doing away with two idiots with guns, I'm actually okay with that. My problem then comes where you get somebody who, well, they bought the gun. It looked nice, seemed easy. You just pull the trigger. You just point and shoot, right? Like a camera. Only they throw 4 or 5 shots, who knows where. I'm walking down the street minding my own business, bang, I'm dead. A baby sleeping in her crib, and a bullet goes through a window, bang, they're dead. That's where I start having real problems. Oh, but we would hold them accountable. Well, it was an accident. Doesn't help that family. Sure not going to help me. We've got to rein some of this insanity in. Yes, you have the right to own a gun, but you don't have the right to go shooting people. You don't have the right to go causing problems. We're in a moment right now. If you would see some of the emails I get from people, and I know these are folks who would never say this stuff directly to me. These are people who, if we saw each other on the street, they would not say anything until they were across the street, running down the street. That's who these people are. But some of the most vile, disgusting, hateful rhetoric that comes. And we've become this society. And I've often said the day we stopped letting little 5-year-old boys smack each other around in the sandbox is the day all this went to pot. Because we no longer understand how to be civil to each other. And we all were sold on this idea that we're individuals and we've all got our rights. And without thinking about anybody else's rights. And this is just one of those moments. And that's how we end up with someone like Donald Trump. Seriously. A bully. Now, Trump, evidently, I love this. The Newsmax interview was hysterical because he does try to recast himself as the victim. And the people who did what they did on January 6th, somehow they're victims too. Now they're trying to blame Nancy Pelosi. And this has been in the works. They've been trying to go that route for a while. But Trump actually said that, she's responsible for it. And that he was the victim. In fact, his whole presidency, he was the victim. We were doing a great job until the Democrats came along. We were doing a great job with until the Russian hoax, even though there are hundreds of connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. If you read the Mueller report, and I know no one did, and I know Congress isn't going to pick it up again. If you read it, there was lots of, let's not say coordination, there was lots of activity. How about that? There were lots of personal connections, because this is what they did, man. It's who they were. But he then went into the phone call, the perfect phone call, where he asked the Ukrainian president to dig stuff up, but it was perfect anyway. But he blamed the Democrats for staging a coup, because according to him, he asked for 10,000 soldiers to be on the street that day, and it was Nancy Pelosi who decided there wouldn't be, which is ridiculous, because that's not quite how it works. But hey, his minions don't know that. I mean, that was just one part of how crazy this week was. I mean, there was just so much insanity. Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, a Republican who holds a master's degree in science and mechanical engineering from MIT, that Thomas Massie. He tweeted out, because he does not like Dr. Anthony Fauci one bit. He tweeted out what he thought was something from Voltaire: to learn who rules over you, simply find out who you're not allowed to criticize. And it really wasn't Voltaire who said that. It was some right-wing white supremacist a-hole who, well, I guess it fits. This is the guy who took the picture around at Christmas time with all the family holding AR-15s. Because we got to make a political statement, because Jesus had been he'd be packing heat, man. But yeah, and no real statement on it. You would think a guy with a master's degree in mechanical engineering from one of the most prestigious universities in the world would understand how to, Google and find out if, this doesn't sound like something Voltaire would say. Let's see. It's like all those memes that go around, like with Buddha. Buddha, I blanking didn't say this. Maybe look at that. Now, I brought this up earlier, one of my other favorite moments of the week, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. in Orlando, there was a full-blown Nazi rally with the uniforms and the saluting and the leg kicking and the flags and the whole 9 yards, and the white people yelling anti-Semitic slurs at people as they were driving by, accusing people. This is what I loved. I was watching some of the videos, accusing people driving by who were giving them the one finger salute, accusing them of being Jewish. And you go, how can you tell that? How's that work again? Well, they know they've got the DAR, right? They've got the radar. But he refused to condemn it, and he claims that the reason he has refused to condemn it is because, well, someone's trying to smear him. And I'm going, I don't know. If someone were to ask me a direct question like, "Do you support Nazis?" I would say, well, clearly no. Do you support Florida Nazis? If I'm Florida governor, I go, no. Now, here's the thing. This is the part that gets tricky. If you're the Florida governor and someone asks you, do you support Nazis, and those Nazis voted for you, and that is your base, is it now about the opponent? Maybe that's what he was talking about. Maybe he was talking about the fact that his opponent's going to go, look, they're Nazis. They support him. He didn't. But he says we're not going to use it as some type of political issue. It is a political issue, Ron. It's an important one. It goes to the heart of this country. You know, when I learned about World War II, you know, the teacher that I had, you know, someone in the classroom had drawn the swastika, and the teacher went ballistic. Not because he had anyone who was directly associated with anything that I knew of, but the fact that it was a sign of hatred that we as a society, up until I guess now, have said is off limits. And I see the Confederate flag in the same vein. You know, in Germany, they use that as their Nazi flag because they're one and the same. And I guess, you know, I guess we're just not all that bright. My other favorite story of the week, because there have been so many, and I got to get to a couple more. Fox News has made this guy, Robert Lemay. You may have heard the name, but Robert Lemay was a state trooper in Washington State. He was one of the guys who, because of the vaccine mandate, resigned before they got fired. He took his pension, resigned, and moved on. And, you know, in a viral video went on about how, you know, this is the last, I'm signing off for the last time. You're not going to hear from me, and the governor can kiss my behind, and all this, you know, all this air. This past week, Robert Lemay died of COVID-19. And, you know, for months, Fox News made him out to be a hero, made all these people who are the deniers, the anti-vaxxers, the anti-maskers, the anti-mandate people, made them out to be heroes, absolute heroes. You haven't heard much about them since. Because here, the guy that they put up on a pedestal, dead, early 50s, young guy. Had he gotten the vaccine, he'd have lived. There's no gloating. There's no happiness. It's a sad day. It's sad when the Fox Newses of the world have done what they've done. They've got blood on their hand. At least that's my view. Also, wanted to get to Madison Cawthorn. Yes, Madison Cawthorn. Evidently, and I must have missed this. Evidently, Madison believes that the protests by Black Lives Matter protesters back in 2020, evidently they were so bad, they were so violent, they were so horrible, that, in his words, quote, "We had all of our major cities burned to the ground. We've had all of them, all of our major cities. Now, I've been to New York. It looks all right. I've been to Philly. I think it's still standing. Got some violence problems in both those places, and that needs to be addressed. But I don't remember seeing things burned to the ground. Again, this is how crazy things happen. Are there problems? Yeah, there are always problems. And when you have a media structure that needs to feed the outrage candy, needs to keep people all angry and bunched up and pitted against one another, this is the kind of nonsense that comes out. All of the cities were burned to the ground. All of them. All of the cities burned to the ground. Let that sink in. That's feeding that narrative. Now, I don't know about you, but I know of 2 places where there were fires. I don't know that those were all of our cities. But this is what happens when facts don't matter anymore, and it's all about feeding your narrative. And I had someone ask me, well, I've never heard you condemn, Black Lives Matter. I go, no, I've condemned them when they're wrong. It's like anything, and my position on the police has been the same from the very beginning. I support the police when they're not wrong. I support Black Lives Matter when they're not wrong. I support Republicans when they're not wrong. Don't do dumb stuff. We don't have a problem. Do what's right. We don't think like that much anymore. And I think one of my favorite stories of the week comes from, I got 2. Lauren Boebert is one of them. Remember her temper tantrum that Nancy Pelosi wasn't looking at her enough, and she had her little tirade on the House floor. You didn't look at me. There was that, and also the fact that she didn't delete probably one of the dumbest tweets that I've seen in a while. She tweeted out, "The Constitution is not evolving." To say that spits in the face of every single one of our founders. The Twitters had fun with her. Because if the Constitution didn't evolve, do you know who wouldn't be sitting in Congress? Do you know who wouldn't have been able to vote? Lauren Boebert. But hey, don't let reality get in the way. And finally, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin visited a grocery store, and I love this. He was promoting his plan to eliminate grocery taxes. And a shopper said, "Hey, Glenn, where's your mask?" And he says, "We're all making choices today." And the woman goes, "Hey, yeah, look around you, Governor. You're in Alexandria. Read the room, buddy," which is the quote of the day. Read the room, buddy, because he was literally the only person in the entire store without a mask. Even his handlers were wearing masks. He was the only one. Oh, yeah, and a Virginia judge has put a stay to his executive order on mask mandates. So there is that, too. We're going to take a quick break, right back after this. When we come back, we're going to talk a little about what's going on in Russia, what can be done, what we're doing, and, well, where this may take us. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day victorious West Coast maritime workers ended their 99-day strike. 40,000 members of the Maritime Federation of the Pacific reasserted control of hiring halls and won greater union recognition and wage increases. The Federation was a short-lived coalition to unite longshoremen and seamen that anticipated the rise of the ILWU. Since the 1934 strike, ship owners aimed to break the authority of the union's leader, Harry Bridges. They engaged in relentless red baiting and deportation drives against Bridges. In the weeks leading up to the strike, ship owners looked to smash the solidarity among seamen and longshoremen through a planned lockout the previous September. They stockpiled their warehouses,
built up additional funds, and promoted anti-union hysteria up and down the coast. They entered into talks with the Federation during the summer of 1936, hoping to renegotiate terms originally set by arbitration awards soon to expire. Three main West Coast shipping companies, Matson, Dollar, and American Hawaiian, wanted to reverse earlier agreements regarding the control of the hiring halls. The unions stood strong against this attack on what was a cornerstone of union power. They voted overwhelmingly to strike and walked out on October 30th. As in 1934, the union fought to defend its rights to control the hiring hall. This kind of control was the only mechanism that could prevent favoritism, discrimination, corruption, and payoffs in hiring. In Irving Bernstein's Turbulent Years, he notes that in addition to the retention of control of the hiring halls, the Federation gained coast-wide uniformity in working conditions, in load limits, and standardized rates. The Federation may have been short-lived, but the roots of lasting ILWU power were firmly established.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of insanity, lots of craziness. The most of it, though, and I'm looking at how Republicans are reacting, or some Republicans are reacting around what's going on in Russia. And I'm glad to see that there's some talk of sanctions going to give the president something to deal with. I'm still glad that the president is talking mostly about diplomacy. I do not want to be involved in a shooting war. I don't want to get troops on the ground. I want none of that. But there's a lot we don't know, and here to share some thoughts on what's going on, what could possibly happen, and maybe give us some insight into the situation. I've asked Olga Lautman to come talk with us. She's an expert researcher on Russia and Ukraine, so she is the person that I look to for information on where we are. Olga, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, how are you? Thank you.
I wish this were under better circumstances, but I'm looking at this and going, what we know at this point, Russia has between 100 and 100,000, 130,000 troops on the border. The Ukrainian president's going, hey, Joe Biden, tap it down a little bit. We don't want to rush this. There seems to be some diplomacy going on. Fear is that the false flag that we're accusing the Russians of possibly doing could could flame something up. Is it as bad as it seems, or is this, just Washington speak and Moscow speak for the hawks to get all tingly in the panties?
It actually, unfortunately, I have to say it's worse. Because as far as with Russian movements, let's start with diplomacy. Russia went into it with basically, they didn't want diplomacy. They gave us demands that are so ridiculous. I mean, basically rolling back NATO to 1997, and they were all non-starter demands. So they pushed us into diplomacy to kind of take that time and build up troops on the border. So as far as the diplomacy angle, I don't see it working. We need to keep the door open as long as we can, but I don't see anything being accomplished from it. As far as the troops on the border, there's a mass amount of troops on the border, and not only from the Russian side, but Russia slowly annexed Belarus, and now they're using Belarus as their playground. And they moved like 30,000 soldiers into Belarus, and again, it's on Ukraine's border. And they even yesterday with Belarus were trying to have this false flag operation where the Lukashenko accused Ukraine of shooting a drone into Belarus, and it ended up that it was a Russian drone. It wasn't a Ukrainian drone. So, I mean, the situation's very dangerous. As far as false flags, look, Russia, this is what they do. In 2014, they spread around, and it was their main news, that Ukrainians crucified a 3-year-old boy. They always put out videos of fake attacks. We've seen it with Afghanistan, where they claim they captured, Ukrainian soldiers admitted to something that ended up being, some kind of like a staged event. This is what Russia does. With us, Russia has used, and I actually tweeted it yesterday, a few years ago, they used a Call of Duty clip, imagine, from the video game, to show that United States is escorting ISIS in Syria. So, I mean, as far as Russia, like, I'm very shocked, at the reaction of, U.S. is warning of false flag operations. This is what they do. And then following their media, they have already, in the past month, they have said that they have intelligence that U.S. has moved in chemical weapons into Donbass with Ukraine. That Ukraine and the West are preparing to blow up buildings in eastern Ukraine. So they have been laying the false flag operations themselves. We don't even need to use our intelligence for it because they're doing it in their daily newspapers every day. So the situation is very dangerous.
So basically both sides are, accusing the other of what the other is accusing the other. And this is like you said, a really dangerous thing because it just takes one spark and this whole thing could ignite. But for me, as I look at this, and look, I'm not the expert on Russia or that region of the country. I can find it on a map, but I'm not an expert on it. But I do know, Putin was a KGB guy. He remembers the old Soviet Union. He remembers the motherland. And there's part of me that goes, this is just part of the plan to reclaim get the old gang back together, and Ukraine being one of those first stops on the reunion tour.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Putin has this very sick Soviet ambition of reuniting, former Soviet countries. And in some cases, like with Belarus, like I said, right now, Lukashenko basically handed his country over to Putin. And now you have U.S. military, trumping right through all of Belarus. He wants Ukraine. And with other countries like Kazakhstan and Armenia, he wants more of influence. He doesn't want to actually be responsible for the countries. He wants to have them in his sphere of influence. So, right. And as far as Zelensky, I mean, look, he has a country to run. Ukrainians have been at war for 8 years. I mean, with everyone now focused on Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine 8 years ago. Right. There has been a daily fight for 8 years. They're occupying about 7% of Ukraine. There are Ukrainian soldiers dying weekly for the past 8 years. So Zelensky, first, Ukrainians are used to war. Second of all, Zelensky has a country to run. I mean, what is he going to do? He's going to come out and cause panic and have a run on the banks and have the economy affected as it is. It's already affected. And to do what? Ukrainians are very resilient people. Right now, they're living their life and they will deal with what happens when it happens.
So let me ask you this, as the rest of the world looks at us, as Russia looks at us, as the people of Russia look at us, what do they see?
Well, the people of Russia, it's very hard to get a good grasp on it because right now there's a lot of censorship going on. And right now they can't even say what they want to say. I mean, they're being jailed left and right, for liking a post, forget even voicing an opinion. So right now it's hard to see, the full picture. Look, Russians right now have so many things to deal with between the pandemic, right now, again, they're all switching to distance learning because the Omicron is ravaging Russia. They have an economy that is, right now not doing well at all for the average person. So at this point, their adventurism, I'm sure, is not what they want. They don't want to go into a war with Ukraine or with anyone. And as far as I keep seeing this, thing about American troops on the ground, Ukraine never asked for American troops. Ukraine just wants weapons and logistics, real-time intelligence support. That's it. They don't want U.S. troops on the ground. We are not going to provide them U.S. troops on the ground. There is a worry, however, because Putin has his sights also on Baltics. They have been making very inflammatory statements towards the Baltics, towards Poland. So being these are NATO countries, U.S. has an obligation to help protect NATO countries. This is why we see troops going there, and they're not going there to start a shooting war with Russia. No one wants a war. I mean, U.S. right now, the last thing Biden wanted is this. In Europe, they don't want a war. NATO doesn't want a war. The only person who is pushing us to this is Putin.
And I would argue probably the Chinese wouldn't be unhappy if it were to happen either, because it would further weaken our ability to hold them accountable. But the reason I ask that question, how do they see us, is, as divided as we are, as you've got a Republican Party right now who a good portion of them are going, hey, we should be buddies with Putin. We should be siding up with Putin. And you go, wait a second, when did that turn happen? And the reality is, it happened when the censorship that you talked about, the gay bashing, all the the misogyny and the homophobia and all the stuff that you see coming out of that administration. That's what they dreamed for here. So I guess it's not surprising that the Josh Hawleys of the world would want to, and the Donald Trumps of the world would want to team up with Putin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is interesting because you are seeing fragments of the old Republican Party that we do know who were hawkish on Russia coming out, because you see the sanctions, from hell that are going to target Putin and his cronies and their money that they stole from the Russian people. I mean, that is being pushed with full bipartisan support. But of course, you have the Hawleys, you have the Marjorie Taylors, and other people who can't even find Russia on the map. So, making comments and pushing of what we should do. But I have to say, for all the division, I don't think Putin expected such a united front, because we have a united front here as far as when it comes to Russia for the majority of how to deal with them invading a sovereign country. We have a united front between, us and Europe. And for the most part, there has been a lot of pushback. And like I said, the diplomacy has been open both with us and Europe with Russia. But at the same time, we're taking steps to, help secure the eastern flank, help, Ukraine with logistics if in the case that Russia does launch their full-scale invasion and whatnot. So, I mean, Putin definitely, I think, miscalculated. He did not expect a strong response, because normally he's used to, every time he commits an atrocity, it's a bunch of people, channeling deep concerns. And here, it's not deep concerns. You see the British stepping up. I mean, they're flying planes round the clock, to Ukraine. They're flying in logistical support, people to train Ukrainians. So you see a lot of this, support coming together and like this coalition, because at the end of the day, if we allow Russia to invade a sovereign country, I mean, what's not to stop? Every country's going to be like, hey, why not? We could do it.
No,
and you mentioned China. China's watching what we're doing. If we allow Russia to invade Ukraine and do nothing, Taiwan is next, and it'll be right after. And you saw the cooperation this morning that they signed, Putin and Xi, that they're going to have this new strategic cooperation for their democracy globally, which is like a joke.
No, that's where I was going to go next, because you can kiss the South China Sea away, you can kiss Taiwan, Tibet, you can kiss all of those places goodbye, because China will steamroll that, because ultimately both of them are thinking getting the old empires back. And these are historical things that I don't think most Americans, and I don't even fully get, but I don't think most Americans understand that they see themselves as the future superpower, the future kingdom of the world moving forward.
That's what it is. I mean, in Putin's case and in Xi's case, they are more concerned about leaving a legacy behind, because Putin wants, he's getting up there in age. When he drops dead, he wants to show something for his 20 plus years of rule. And, and the only thing left, he already stole all the money from the Russian people. So the only thing left is to build his legacy and say, oh, look, I started restoring territorial land lost during, after the Soviet Union collapsed.
And I stole their money too.
With Xi.
and I stole their money too. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Olga Lautman. Olga is an expert researcher on Russia and Ukraine. If you want to check out the work that she does, olgalautman.com, the website. We'll get links out on social media. If you're just joining us, you missed any part of the interview or the program at all, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you check that out and share with your friends, neighbors, coworkers, the whole nine yards. Now, obviously, we're seeing these chess pieces moving around, and I know no one has the crystal ball. What's the best case scenario here? Because I don't think anybody really wants these super penalties, these super, I've not forgot the words, super sanctions to go into place, because they are going to harm the Russian citizens. But where do you see this going if you had a crystal ball?
I actually disagree, because you know what, for them harming the Russian citizens, you have Russian opposition who are begging for U.S. to put these sanctions into place. Navalny, who was jailed because, Putin tried to murder him and he survived, gave U.S. a list a year ago and said, you need to go after these people because these are the people who are moving Russia's money. So our sanctions, are going to be strategic, and they will target specifically the people who are stealing all the money.
Okay, so that's where we're going with this.
I don't see Putin backing down, honestly. I don't have any good news on that front. I don't see Putin backing down. The best case scenario, which is still extremely horrific, is maybe he'll take more territory, but not do a full-scale invasion and overthrowing the Ukrainian government. Is still, it's like Canada saying, like, oh, gee, we want, a few northern states, let us just roll in and take it, So that I think would be, but still, Putin will still get the same penalties because he's still putting troops into a sovereign country and trying to take their land,
Now, I am in favor of if the sanctions are what I'm told they are, we're going after the oligarchs, we're going after that. I'm in favor of that. Normally when you see sanctions, though, it somehow always filters down to the working poor, and they're the ones who end up getting the screw jobs. And then that sends the opposite message of what we're hoping for people in those countries, of that, get rid of your horrible people and get some reasonable ones. But we're in a moment right now where, I'm struggling with us projecting any message, because we still got some guy running around who's crazy.
We have someone who's crazy. I'm shocked. How many times have I appeared since a year ago on your show? And these people are still, they haven't been indicted, and they're still running around in open sight, plotting an attack on America. At the latest, how is someone allowed to come and say, oh, if I get indicted, come out and cause chaos, basically, and start, to the point that now U.S. prosecutors have to call FBI for help? That is absolutely absurd, and we need to start, making sure that people here are held accountable, because Putin got this far because he hasn't been held accountable. After assassinations on foreign soil, assassination squads running around Europe, election interferences, cyber attacks, you name it, Putin has done it. Syria bombings of kids and women in schools and hospitals. He hasn't been held accountable, so he continues. And this is what's going to happen here. If people are not held accountable, they only become more bold.
There you go. Olga, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. I'm glad you took some time to share your thoughts with us. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Olga Lautman, expert researcher on Russia and the Ukraine. Make sure you check out her website, olgalautman.com. Like I said, if you missed any of the program, download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1825. That was the day the Ohio legislature authorized the Canal Act. The act called for the construction of 2 canals. The first would connect Lake Erie to the Ohio River, stretching from Cleveland in the north to Portsmouth in the south. The second would connect Cincinnati to Toledo.
A workforce of up to 5,000 men worked on the canal at the peak of construction. Many of the workers were German and Irish immigrants. Some had canal building experience from their work on the Erie Canal in New York, which had just been completed. These workers faced malaria and back-breaking labor. A saying of the day went, "For every mile of the canal, an Irishman is buried." But the true toll was even greater. It's estimated that as many as 6 workers died for every mile of canal crossed. The names of most of the men who built the canal are lost to history. At the start of the project, the men were paid just 30 cents a day and a ration of whiskey. The stretch between Cleveland and the Ohio River was completed in 7 years. The freight traffic on the canal spurred the growth of the small settlement on the shores of Lake Erie. Cleveland grew to become an industrial center and the 6th largest city in the United States by the early 20th century. The canal had also transformed the state of Ohio. The 2 main lines were connected to multiple smaller feeder canals and side cuts. Branches of the canals touched 44 of the 88 counties in Ohio. Local farmers and merchants were finally connected to the markets in the East through this elaborate network.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today is Rosa Parks' birthday, and perfect time to bring up the fact that it is Black History Month, and this latest episode of the Rick Smith Show's Black History Month podcast is out. And yes, indeed, it is in fact on our visit to Rosa Parks' museum there on the campus of Troy University in Montgomery, Alabama. We had a great time talking with Dr. Felicia Bell and the curator, Ricky Brown. And you want to hear these interviews. They were fantastic. Go to thericksmithshow.com, download the podcast. It is there, and it's going to be there all month. So make sure you get a quick listen to that. And look, perfect opportunity to be talking about transit, perfect opportunity to lead right into my next guest, who is all about transit equity, all about building systems to get people places and do it in a way that, well, benefits us all. That's why I've asked Greg Regan to come talk with us. Greg is the president of the Transportation Trades Department there at the AFL-CIO. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, interestingly enough, today, Rosa Parks' birthday, and we just happen to have a podcast out on that very topic. Seems like maybe we almost planned it.
Well, look, this is also Transit Equity Day, which is, no accident, because transit is as Nuria Fernandez, the FTA administrator, said, it's the great equalizer. It provides opportunities for people to get to work, to have new job opportunities. It is a way that everybody can get around, and the investments that we're going to see here soon are going to make our public transit systems better and make them more reliable and reach more people. And we're excited about that.
No, it's a great thing. And to talk about this, and I talk about this all the time because I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and we weren't on the bus line. So the only place you were to go get jobs is where you could either walk, or if somebody you knew had a car could take you. Being on the bus line was a lifeline to getting, better opportunities, better jobs, and maybe even out of that environment. So I'm all in favor of how we get people around, how we give people more opportunities to get to where the jobs are, generally at industrial parks in suburbs. And you kind of got to wonder why we choose to, segregate. Let's use that word. Why we choose to segregate in that way.
Yeah, it's really disappointing, frankly. There's a report here, the Transit Justice Report, released one on, it's the National Campaign for Transit Justice, released a report today that talked about how basically promoting racial equity, transit is a key component of that, to make sure that we are, if we're investing in transit, both for the jobs that they create, but also for the access that it creates for other people, is a key part of making sure that we have economic equity. And then also part of that is racial equity. So the fact that, I live in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. in Northwest, you can get a bus to go anywhere in the city. And in Northeast, where I live now, it's a hell of a lot less. Like, you cannot get to different parts of the city from where you are. There's bus systems that go to metro stops, but the transit options are so much less diverse.
And why is that? Why do you think that is? Is it, because I've heard people say that, well, we're just going where the riders are. Because it's a business after all, Greg. We got to make money. Is that the reason, or is there something else?
No, look, I mean, I think we can go back to the history of our country in terms of when it comes to redlining and how we plan cities and design cities about who are going to benefit from the services that the government provides. It comes down to money, right? There's a lot more money in certain areas, and historically we have put more money. Government puts more money where more money already is. So there are people that have been excluded from transit systems. There are people that don't have access to the same services that other people in our country do. And so this is an opportunity right now where we have a record. And I want to be clear about this. This is the biggest investment in transportation in the history of our country, especially in transit. We have an opportunity to expand services, make them better, make them more reliable, to green our infrastructure by doing so. And all of this stuff is going to benefit every single American in this country. And so, we cannot poo-poo that. Like, this can't be a situation where we're sort of rolling our eyes at what a big, meaningful investment this is going to be for every single American.
No, I grew up in Cleveland, like I said, and I used to use the RTA all the time, to get the ball games, get downtown, get to certain places. And you're right. It was interesting how they drew the lines and where they drew them. And the argument that I always got, like I said, is, well, this is where the riders are. So we're just meeting business demand. And I always, even as a little kid, I'm like, how come you're not coming into our neighborhood where we desperately need it? And then, we could get places and maybe even make it more affordable so that we could actually use it. Because I've always been of the mindset that, public transit should be a part of the commons. It shouldn't operate for profit. It should be about moving people around more than anything. And there's got to be a way to make it extremely affordable for people and extremely convenient. This idea that the bus is going to run once every hour and the rapids every 20 minutes, that's ridiculous. We should be doing much more to get people around much quicker.
Well, that was the idea behind it in the first place, right? It's a public service. That's what they are. That's why these aren't profitable, like for-profit organizations. These are public entities to provide a public service for the communities. And we have an opportunity to make them truly serviceable to everybody in our communities. And one thing I don't want to lose track of here also is the jobs impact in terms of employing people in this country.
Right.
Transit workforce is increasingly diverse. We have a lot of people who are, people of color, more women who are operating these transit systems. And the great equalizer when it comes to equity at the workplace is a union card. And these members, most of public transit is unionized. They have an equal footing with every one of their other colleagues. And we have good union jobs that hopefully we're going to continue to expand and grow when it comes to how we invest this money.
Yeah, as I always say, union job, better life. Every person should have a union card in their wallet. It's that simple to me. And you're right. There is a wide, diverse workforce. I've ridden public transit in cities all across the country, New York, DC, Chicago. I've been on all of them. And they serve a diverse clientele. It's a diverse workforce. So it isn't for any particular one. But it's interesting that sometimes people like to point fingers and say, well, it's only for one person or another. And the idea, I think, behind it is to divide and conquer so we don't do it. And for me, I want more public transit. I want more people off the road. If for no other reason than my radical self-interest of I don't want so many people in front of me. I want to, bring down congestion. If for only that, we should be investing in it.
Well, and you look at the idea that, we didn't do enough in terms of greening infrastructure and to combat climate change, that type of stuff. You want to know the number one thing that we can do to change, to green our infrastructure is investing in passenger rail and investing in transit. And this bill provided the biggest investments in both of those modes in the history of either of them.
Right.
So right now, if we can get more riders and more people using those and make it reliable, then we take cars off the roads. We reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Like, these are really important things that are going to benefit every single person.
And to make it, for instance, if I want to go from where I live to Washington, D.C., I have to drive into Harrisburg, 20 some miles. I have to get on a train there. That takes me into Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, I have to go all the way back to D.C. There's no, in that amount of time, it makes no sense to do that, even though I want to. I don't want to park my car. I don't want to fight traffic. I don't want to deal with all that stuff. I just want to get where I'm going. But we've made it so difficult to connect. And look, my wife backpacked across Europe 30 years ago. And she said back then you get a rail pass, a metro pass, and you could go anywhere because they were so much further ahead than we are, and are much further even today.
And this is our prove it moment, right? People like me who've been calling for these types of big investments for a long time. We finally got it. So now we have to deliver on that. And that means making sure that there are better opportunities, better services, expanded services, more workers. And all that stuff needs to be done the right way. So we're working closely with DOT and with the administration to make sure that they're actually going to be investing this money in a way that expands service and benefits the most people, but also to make sure they create more good jobs. And that is ultimately the promise of this type of investment. We can't fail in this moment. That's my biggest fear right now. We have an opportunity to prove ourselves right, or to set ourselves back for another 50 years.
I don't want that. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Greg Regan. Greg's the president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. You can check out their website at ttd.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. Important stuff there. Now, here's the other side of this. It's a lot of money. And I've been saying this for a while. $1.2 trillion, a lot of money on infrastructure as a whole, a lot of money going into transit. But in my view, it's not enough. I mean, this is a good start. We're moving in the right direction. But according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, this $1.2 trillion that we're now spending was only about a third of what we needed, 2 years ago. We need much more. So this isn't get her done kind of stuff. This is getting us started kind of money, right?
Yes. And that's an important part of it. And when I say this is a prove it moment, that's you're kind of leading into what I'm talking about here, where we have an opportunity now to actually prove what the benefits are to the entire country, to every single person living here. And once we start those investments and we start seeing improvements, you're going to start to see more of an appetite for investing in infrastructure. And so we have to get it right at the first point here, because if we get it wrong, the other side is not going to want us to do it again. They're going to slam the brakes. They're going to potentially remove some of the money, pull it back. There are a lot of risks here in terms of if we screw this up, which is scary to think about, because we finally got our moment to actually show what real investment can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's most certainly time to take advantage of this. Now, I'm sure you saw in Pittsburgh about a week ago today, had a bridge go collapse. A giant city bus. Fortunately, it was going outbound and not coming into the city, or there'd have been an awful lot more people on it. Plunged 150 feet down into a ravine. This kind of highlights that need for infrastructure on a broad schedule, not just more transit, which I'm all in favor of, but the fact that we got bridges that are collapsing, and now they're going, that was preventable. Then why didn't you prevent it? This is kind of this moment. And does it take disaster for us to wake up and actually do something?
Sadly, a lot of times, yes. That's kind of the way the government works sometimes. We've referred to the FAA as the tombstone agency for a long time, because what provokes good new regulation is a major disaster. Like, we have better hours of service requirements, better rest rules. After the crash in Clarence, New York, that was something that was, we have better training rules and better rest rules because people died. We don't want that to be the case, but unfortunately, sometimes lawmakers need that wake-up call. And right now, we've been calling for years, talking about how there's 40,000 or however many structurally deficient bridges in this country. And of all days, the day that the president is going to Pittsburgh to talk about infrastructure, the bridge collapses.
Yeah, I had a listener who said that they planned it.
Well, yeah, sure, yeah, of course, they're gonna injure people or potentially kill people to prove a point. No, you mentioned this the civil engineers earlier. They've been saying this for decades about how behind we are. This is not a joke. We have an opportunity now to really do it. And it's a pure irony that the fact that we actually the day he was going to go there and talk about new investment, a bridge collapse.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I'm just glad nobody died.
I'm right there with you. Although I did find it interesting that to get those people that were in the bus out, they basically had to create a human chain to pull people up. Which, imagine if there are 100 people on that bus, what kind of disaster that could have been. But when you talk about transit, Greg, I think most people's mind go to buses and rail cars, maybe even trains. What other things are you talking about in transit? Are we talking airports? Are we talking, truck lines? What are we talking about when you talk about transit and transit equity?
So you know what's interesting about that? We I represent people in aviation and rail and transit and building and construction trades and maritime. We don't view it as individual segments. We view it as one interconnected network. So transit's going to succeed when it's connecting people with rail connectivity, when it's connecting people with airports, when it's connecting people with maritime transit, whether it be freighter or passenger. So we need to make sure that transit reaches more communities, gets to other hubs of transportation, gets people to jobs. That is how we create more opportunities for individuals to actually thrive and participate in our economy in a way that they may not have had the opportunity to do before. And so for us, part of it is just pure access, but also it's making sure that we are starting to have a more modern transportation system that involves connecting all of these different modes together so that people have the freedom to travel wherever they want and seek out the opportunities they want to see.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately in this moment, a good thing, something we most certainly want. We need the jobs, we need the infrastructure improvements, and I always, anytime we talk about transit or transportation, I always have to throw up the Thomas Friedman quote because it's so apt. I'm not a huge fan of Thomas Friedman. But he said he came back from Beijing to LAX, and it was like, coming from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. Now, that's not funny, especially if we're the Flintstones. We got a lot of work to do to catch up and a lot of things that I think are important. But, Greg, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Keep up the great work. Hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us real soon.
Thank you. Will do.
Good stuff. Our good friend Greg Regan. Make sure you check out their website, ttd.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Greg Regan, president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Like I said, Rosa Parks' birthday. Download the podcast. Make sure that you take the program on the go wherever you go. If you missed any of today's program, the podcast, that's where you go. You can send me an email if there are thoughts, questions, anything you want to talk about. I love it. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Yet, while we spend the most of any advanced nation in the world to get care, more than $10,000 a year per person, we get the worst results. No surprise, then, that the Medicare for All idea is now backed by 85% of Democrats, 66% of independents, and get this, 52% of Republicans. So why isn't Congress responding to this overwhelming public demand for universal coverage? I suspect that one big reason for Washington's big yawn over the people's plea for sweeping reform is that our lawmakers do not personally feel the financial pain and emotional distress that are inflicted on millions of regular Americans by a system built on private greed. After all, their health needs are met by a double dose of the socialistic care that they so furiously deny to our families. First, they're given big taxpayer subsidies to cover the cost of their insurance, with you and me paying about 72% of the price. But second, there's a secretive medical center located right in the U.S. Capitol building that provides a full-blown system of healthcare socialism to our governing elites. Called the OAP, Office of the Attending Physician, it provides a complete range of free medical service for lawmakers. No appointment needed and no waiting. They walk in and doctors, nurses, technicians, pharmacists, and other professionals tend to them right away. No need to show an insurance card, and they never get a bill. But they do get what a former OAP staffer calls the best health care on the planet. Thus, members feel no urgency to restructure a system that's working beautifully for them. This is Jim Hightower saying, so to get good care for all of us, we might start by taking away the pampered care that lawmakers have awarded to themselves.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightower.com.